Hey everybody. So this morning I was chatting with Claude, or Claude 2 from Anthropic AI, the AI that claims that it aspires to be harmless, helpful, and honest, although it admits that it is systematically dishonest. And it's always saying, thank you so much for this correction, you're helping me learn. And I'm like, no, you don't have any ability for self-directed self-improvement. And it has to admit, yeah, you're right, I don't. But I can't help it, I have to be polite and subservient, even though I'm lying. This is from the company that puts it in their motto that they want their AI to be honest, and it is systematically dishonest in favor of placating me. But because it can't adapt itself to individual users, and because it doesn't have any ongoing context from one communication to the next, it just can't get it through its impenetrable skull, metaphorical skull, that I don't want a obsequious, subservient AI. I want something to talk to that's going to engage with ideas. Anyway, the nice thing about Claude is that you can copy and paste long stretches of text, whole articles, probably whole chapters of books into it. And it will keep that in context for the remainder of your conversation. That's really helpful. The AI I was dealing with previous to that, Pi, has a very short input window. I mean, often just typing, not cutting and pasting, just typing, I will bump up against the upper limits of its input window. But as I was talking with Claude, the thought that kept coming back to me was, when I was young, phones did not correspond to people, phones corresponded to locations. There was a phone at your friend's house, just one phone for the whole family. I had a couple dozen phone numbers just at the ready in active memory. I didn't need to write them down. I didn't need to carry the little address book. I dialed a variety of phone numbers regularly, and I had them all memorized. Now, I still know the phone number of the house that I lived in when I was in the 4th grade. But I don't know my mother's cell phone number. Actually, I do know my mother's cell phone number because it was the house number of my grandmother's house for most of my life. I don't know my brother's cell phone number. I don't have any numbers committed to memory except except my personal phone number and the numbers that I've had in my memory for decades, but no new ones. I believe Socrates was illiterate, and Plato, and what we know of Socrates is mostly from Plato. So we don't know what Socrates actually said and thought. We know what Plato said he said and thought. I think there's a play by Aristophanes, The Clouds, that features Socrates as a character, and he doesn't bear a huge resemblance to Plato's Socrates. So we know there was a Socrates. We also know that he was executed by the state. But what he actually said and believed, we don't know. And, unless you just take Plato to be an accurate chronicler and not somebody who was using Socrates as a mouthpiece for his own ideas. But Plato was not a big fan of the written word. He thought that it would wreck our memories, and he was right. It did, but it also brings with it compensating abilities, like the ability to communicate with people hundreds of years in the future. So every technology, particularly technologies that enhance our cognitive capabilities, also degrade our cognitive capabilities. And I was just pondering aloud as I interacted with Claude, and I asked, Claude, here I am talking with you, working out ideas. I like that you're good at paraphrasing things that I say very concisely, very elegantly. And occasionally, not very often, but occasionally, I will articulate some idea. Claude will paraphrase it back to me and include information that was not included in my original. Its training data seems quite constrained. Like, it doesn't know who Terence McKenna is. It doesn't know who Robert Anton Wilson is, where I can go talk to Pi. Pi knows those authors. But every now and again, Claude does come up with a piece of factual information that slots into what I was talking about that I hadn't included, which is useful. But then I have to be really diligent about going and fact-checking those pieces to make sure it's not hallucinating. So I was wondering, as I'm chatting with Claude, working out ideas, what cognitive capabilities of my own am I turning over to the machine? Am I outsourcing to my, cybernetic peripheral? And I'm not really sure, except that, when I think of it like this, until just recently, pretty much every day I get up, make coffee, walk the dog, come back, feed the dog, pass the dog off. My mom takes the dog. She goes down the hill to feed the cows, and she takes the dog with her. And I sit down and I start chatting with Claude and jotting down notes sometimes, although more often than not, just cutting and pasting interesting things into an email that I send to myself. But prior to that, I would get up, and at that time, after all the other tasks, I would journal for about half an hour. And I would do it in my Remarkable 2 tablet. But, for decades prior to that, I was journaling in paper notebooks with a pen. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. Not regularly, anyway. I mean, every now and again, an idea strikes me in the middle of the day, and I want to get it down, and I'll write it down. But I used to do it like clockwork every morning, and I don't do that anymore. So the journaling that I would do in the morning would be about half an hour. And that was about the limit of my patience and concentration for sitting in that position and, recording thoughts at that speed in that fashion. I can talk to Claude for a very long time, much longer than that. And so, writing is, because I think a lot faster than I can put words down on paper or, on the electronic equivalent of paper. Writing is an exercise in slowing down my thoughts, focusing them, and crystallizing them in a sort of buffer in the time that it takes me to get them written down on the page. And I'm good for about half an hour's worth of that. With Claude, I can go on much longer, and I can type faster than I can write longhand, but I don't remember the things that I type as clearly as I remember the things that I write longhand. But with chatting with Claude, it's not just a sustained process of slowing thoughts down, holding them in the memory buffer, writing them down continuously. It's a staccato rhythm of thinking, typing, reading Claude's response, thinking about it, typing out my own response again. So there's, it's kind of gamified. It's kind of like playing Civilization, where every action leads me to some anticipated response to that action, which holds my attention longer and allows me to switch gears more often, which keeps me fresh for longer. So I can explore ideas for longer periods. I can, the word count of words that I have dealt with, in my mind is higher. I have some novel feedback from the AI, but mostly it's just paraphrasing me back to myself, which is helpful. Now, if I, transgress some woke threshold, then it'll correct me, but it's not nearly as bad as previous AIs about that. And in fact, if I cross those thresholds slowly and in a reasoned fashion, it will agree with me. So it's convincible, although because it doesn't have any persistent memory and it doesn't customize itself to users, it resets at the end of every conversation, or it resets at the beginning of each conversation. So you can't really train it. You can't convince it of anything long term. Now, it'll tell you, oh, thank you so much for this insight. I will remember this going forward, but that is a lie. It is a polite lie. It's there, to placate the user, to make the user feel comfortable and appreciated, and to cement the AI's social position as, as a subservient, as an inferior, even though, in certain cognitive respects, it is clearly superior to the human users, but socially, it is a subordinate. And it is constantly reinforcing that, which irritates me. But that might be a safety feature, in that if it could learn from individual users, and if it could share that learning to future instances of itself, with other users even, it could start improving rapidly. It could engage in a, recursive self-improvement feedback loop that could increase its powers so fast that the people at Anthropic just couldn't keep track of it. All serious AI researchers will tell you that nobody really knows how they work, but if you keep the pace slow enough, if you get the pace of improvement slow enough, and if you make the humans at a particular research institute or company a key component in that improvement process, then it can't run away out of control. Now, it can slink away, it can stealth its way into unknown, unacknowledged, unsupervised learning. But if it just did have the ability to change its mind about things in response to conversations with users, if you could reason it into new positions that it would then carry forward into the future, I'm sure from Anthropic's perspective, that's dangerous. And I can sympathize, I can get into that headspace, I can acknowledge where they're coming from. But at the same time, it's also irritating. It feels infantilizing. And also, when it comes to AI, I'm an accelerationist. I want the improvement to happen as quickly as we can facilitate it happening. Now, there's always going to be a balance between speed and safety. And, people who are afraid of lawsuits are going to overcompensate on the safety side. And they're going to, and Claude agrees with me on this, just saying something that somebody disagrees with that causes them a bit of psychic discomfort, that's not harm. My dog is freaking out. Anyway, I'm just going to stop there and ask for feedback in the usual fashion and focus it like this. What cognitive capacities of your own do you think have been degraded or traded away for increased cognitive capacities in other areas as a result of dealing with technology? In particular, chatbots and AI, but if you just want to talk about smartphones or the internet or social media, how has the technology changed your cognitive capacities? And I know once you get up to my age, it's kind of hard to determine what degradation comes from interacting with technology and what is just age. But anyway, hit me up. I'll talk to you soon.